Hey guys. Okay, so today's video is going to be a fun one, and it involves a couple of prominent internet personalities. If you follow any gaming news of any kind, you'll probably be familiar with at least a few of these guys. So before we get to the fun stuff, a little bit of backstory is needed here. This is Sweet Baby Inc., a company that's been at the center of an internet firestorm recently. I'm actually going to cover these guys in a lot more detail in a future video because there's a lot to go over. But for the purposes of this video, all you need to know is this. Sweet Baby Inc. is a consulting firm that works with game developers to assist them on video game narratives during development to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. The reason that they've come under fire recently is because the company is accused of forcing developers to inject so-called woke politics into the games they've worked on. If you haven't had your brain completely fried by the culture war and don't know what woke politics are, good news. That's where the first hero of our story comes in. This is Boogie2988, a once incredibly popular gaming YouTuber, but now a washed-up has-been who engages in reactionary politics. This specific area of reactionary politics focused mainly on video games. It's part of an online movement called Gamergate, which our friend Boogie here is a proud member of. Technically, this would actually be Gamergate 2.0. The original Gamergate started 10 years ago and was ostensibly something about quote-unquote ethics in games journalism, but became pretty clear pretty quickly that it was just a harassment movement by right-wing internet trolls to go after game journalists and video game developers that tried to broaden video games by including more women and minorities in the medium, because of some conspiratorial plan to subjugate white men. The exact same shit they're complaining about now with Gamergate 2.0. Now, if you think that's an exaggeration, and Gamergaters will heavily deny that their movement has anything to do with such insane and idiotic accusations, well, I'll let one of Gamergate's strongest original soldiers do the talking. So Boogie decides that he wants to defend Gamergate's honor and goes on the Twitters to offer this self-proclaimed hot take. Video games are supposed to be fun, not lectures about why being a white man is bad. So there you have it straight from the horse's mouth, that yes, this movement is entirely about some unhinged paranoid belief that the game industry is conspiring against white men. Those of us who are not on the Gamergate bandwagon should be thankful that people like Boogie are too dumb to be subtle about their true intentions. Now, to address Boogie's comments, I think many people would probably broadly agree with both of those statements. Video games should be fun, and shouldn't lecture about how being a white man is bad. However, there was just one slight problem regarding the latter statement, and that was the fact that most people had no idea what the hell he was talking about. So people asked the obvious follow-up question, which is, where are these games that do in fact lecture the player that white men are bad, as Boogie claimed? And this, folks, is where the fun begins. Hey Boogie, what games shame white men? To which Boogie responds, do your own research. Oh dear. We're off to a great start already with that line. But it gets better when he follows that up with, meanwhile, read the tweet. I didn't say there are any. I said they shouldn't. So he admits that none of the games that he was complaining about actually exist, but brushes it off because he's just kind of like offering general advice, I guess? Like some sort of public service announcement? In the same way that I suppose one could say that senior citizens shouldn't swim in sulfuric acid. Good to know, I guess. Still, others made similar attempts to inquire from Boogie. Here another Twitter user gives it a shot. Can you name 5 games that supported your tweet quickly? To which Boogie responds, even if I can't, it doesn't change the fact that video games should be fun and not lectures. You know, it's almost admirable the way that the anti-woke crowd never lets a little thing like, not actually existing in reality, stop them from going into conniption fits. Many other commenters were equally unimpressed with Boogie's excuses. I'm a white man and video games don't lecture me on why being a white man is bad. Seems like a skill issue. Hotter take. Video games and lobbies are supposed to be fun for everyone, not spaces where white guys make racial slurs and make lame excuses for making them. So true. I hate it when I beat Super Mario and then I get a 10-minute video on Luigi lecturing me about the woke mind virus and the Great Awakening. I've been gaming since '79. What video game did that? Me when I'm playing Super Mario Brothers and the game tells me to kill off the white race instead of killing Bowser.
But fret not.
Because while Mr. Boogie here was sadly unable to provide a single solitary example of the thing he was extremely terrified and angry at, a few other heroic figures would emerge to lend aid to his noble cause. One of those figures is this man right here, who goes by the handle ShortfatOtaku, though on Twitter he goes by @SleepyDevo. Like Boogie, he is another well-known reactionary YouTuber. So he decided to sweep in and save the day by providing actual objective evidence of anti-white male bias in gaming. So here he references a game called This Land Is My Land. What is this game about exactly, you ask? I myself had to do quite a bit of digging because it seems like it didn't exactly light the world on fire when it released. Apparently it's a video game made by a small indie developer in 2021 on Steam. And how does it demonstrate that white people are inherently evil? Well, the game is about the story of a Native American tribe repelling an invasion from white colonizers. Yes, the game is anti-white according to these clowns, because it's considered a bad thing apparently for Native Americans to not want to be genocided. But even then, the game also apparently doesn't glorify violence against the white colonizers. While it allows for violence to occur, excessive violence would actually be penalized. So in terms of teaching kids that it's perfectly fine to hate white men, it's not even doing that job particularly well in my opinion. Now while some major video game outlets covered previews for this game, I couldn't really find any big name sites that actually reviewed it. Going to their Steam page, the user reviews have overall given it very mixed reviews. Again, nothing going on here that set the charts on fire. Though amusingly enough, I did find this fun little video from a few years ago by a YouTuber called YellowFash2, another reactionary YouTuber, that was actually praising the game. Now granted, if you watch the video, a good chunk of that praise probably just has to do with the fact that the company was getting criticized for not consulting actual Native Americans. So this was a great way to own the woke crowd. Regardless, not once throughout his video did he mention pretty much anything negative about it, and certainly didn't think that it was an anti-white male game by any means. If anything, he was actually praising it for being anti-woke. But again, this was a couple of years ago, long before the talking points completely changed based on convenience and opportunity, I'm sure. Anyways, so to review, Mr. Otaku pointed to one single game about Native Americans defending themselves from being systematically murdered by white colonizers, made by a small indie studio who consulted with 0 Native Americans, released several years ago, that sold under 4,000 copies, to middling reviews. Oh, and did I forget to mention that the developer in question was based in Ukraine? Great work, Chief. Of course, many people pointed out these tiny little details as well. Bud, I don't think whiteness is intrinsically tied to colonialism. If you got that mindset, you should probably absorb some of this media and not oversimplify. It's not a white man bad game, it's a colonizer bad game. Not all colonizers are white, and not all white people are colonizers. Did you play the game, or were you just assuming it's white men bad because it shows things from the perspective of a group wronged by white men? Are they bad because they are white, or bad because they are settlers? I want you to think real hard about this one. Take some breaks and drink some water if you need to. This is grossly oversimplified. But either way, the fact that you have to dig this deep to find just one example is telling that this definitely isn't the widespread problem you believe it is. And for that last comment, Mr. Otaku replied with, I never said the game industry is full of white men bad. The problem is much more sophisticated than that. Oh man, we got a twofer here. Mr. Otaku claiming that he wasn't arguing that the game industry is full of people who are trying to create games that are anti-white male propaganda. You know, the original problem Boogie brought up, that he's now pretending that he wasn't defending? And then we have him following up his denial that he thinks gaming has an anti-white male bias with the confirmation that yes, he does think gaming has an anti-white men bias. It's just done in a more sophisticated fashion. It's more clever and clandestine, you see. If you're waiting for an elaboration on exactly what he means by these sophisticated methods, you'll be waiting a good while because he never actually elaborates. It's a really fun thing that a lot of anti-woke reactionary right-wing types tend to do. Get angry at left-leaning people accusing them of doing the incredibly stupid shit they tend to do, followed up almost immediately by admitting that the original accusation was completely accurate after all. And they do this rather frequently in my experience. It's a phenomenon that deserves its own video, honestly, because it's genuinely fascinating. And now finally, we have the last anti-woke soldier in this particular battle of the culture war. This is Harry Robinson, one of the guys who runs the anti-woke Lotus Eaters podcast. He decided to come to the aid of Boogie as well, with undeniable proof of anti-white male bias in gaming. And here he offers an example of what Mr. ShortfatOtaku was probably referring to when he mentioned the sophisticated methods, but was too much of a weenie boy to actually elaborate on. Suicide Squad has a Wonder Woman codex, explaining about how much better the world would be without toxic masculinity, and made her brown. She also gets a dignified death the squad mourn over, whereas they literally piss on Flash's corpse. Okay, lots to chew on here. First of all, he conflates toxic masculinity with being anti-white male. Wonder Woman makes no reference to race here, for the record. Second, I wouldn't think it would be very surprising that Wonder Woman, someone who was raised on an island composed entirely of women, would have a problem with toxic masculinity. But the best part might be this part right here. They made her brown. Never mind that Wonder Woman, being from an island in the Mediterranean, having slightly darker skin is probably not the wildest thing in the world. But just the fact that she's brown is proof of anti-white male bias in the gaming industry. This is an exceptionally odd complaint to make because I would think that if the goal of the developer of Suicide Squad was to spread anti-white male propaganda, couldn't they also just as effectively do that by keeping Wonder Woman's skin white? I figured that would get the point across just as well. Remember, these guys aren't arguing that there's an anti-white bias. I mean, yes, they generally are, but not for this specific case. They're arguing that there's an anti-white male bias. It seems Harry sort of jumped the gun a little too quickly and couldn't contain all his grievances. The replies, as usual, were on point. Tell me you don't know the first thing about Wonder Woman. LOL. That's not a lecture on why being a white man is bad. You did not answer the question. Toxic masculinity is not being a man, nor are white men necessarily folded into toxic masculinity. Being toxic is a choice, one that you seem pretty happy to have made. Made her brown? Do you think Greeks are white? All that just to say, I had to search for this to find an offense that still didn't fit the criteria. You mentioned toxic masculinity, which is not limited to white men, and that Wonder Woman had a dignified death. What part of all that indicated that white men are bad? But the fun doesn't end there, because when another Twitter user asked him why he was playing it after all this time, Harry provided the perfect response. I'm not. This is a screenshot. I've never played the game in the first place. I have better things to do with my time. They asked for one example, and I picked one out. Absolutely incredible. Never mind that not playing a game that you're criticizing is something that was considered worthy of life in prison when somebody like Anita Sarkeesian was accused of such a thing more than 10 years ago. But the fact that the screenshot alone was enough for this guy to make a solid judgment that the game in question, again, the game that he admits he never played, was anti-white male propaganda, should tell you everything you need to know about the anti-woke crowd and their pathetic new crusade. And apparently the "I have better things to do with my time" includes whining on Twitter about a video game that he's never played that he thinks is advocating for white genocide. So a piece of tertiary lore that most players won't see, that you yourself didn't see because you didn't play it, and don't know how it fits into the overall context of the game, that decries racially non-specific personality traits, means the whole game is an affront to white men? Is the better thing to do cataloging your woke in video games folder? Indeed. But I do think it's incredibly important to emphasize just how much of a fail parade this all was. I mean, to reiterate, Gamergate started in 2014. These idiots had over 10 years of gaming that they could sift through to make their case about how much wokeness and white male hatred is in the industry. And the fact that this was the best these chowderheads could come up with is hilarious, pathetic, and thankfully, incredibly comforting. This whole ordeal demonstrated their sad but also sinister true intentions, as well as their embarrassing incompetence. And after having several days of the internet completely mercilessly mock and laugh at him, Boogie engaged in one final act of gaslighting, where he attempted to act incredibly confused as to why everyone was mocking him in the first place. See if you can spot anything important that might be missing from the following tweet of his. "I still think video games are supposed to be fun." I'm pretty sure that wasn't the comment people took issue with. And then a loyal fan replied to Boogie with this: "I still think you're right. I have seen so many people trashing you since yesterday and attributing things you didn't say to you that's actually crazy." To which Boogie responded with this gem: "I mean, that's kind of what you gotta do when you don't have a valid argument. There is no valid argument against the fact that video games are supposed to be fun." Once again, straight from the reactionary playbook, say something incredibly fucking stupid, get mercilessly dunked on by everyone, then pretend that you don't even know why you were getting dunked on in the first place and how it's everyone else's fault. Just another day that ends in Y with these people. As I said earlier, I plan on making another video going over Sweet Baby Inc.'s controversy, as well as going into more detail with the original Gamergate and this new slightly mutated variant. But one thing I can say that I'm glad about is that Gamergate 2.0 is not off to a great start. The original Gamergate had the benefit of their true motives being hidden behind some seemingly legitimate veneer involving video games journalism. But here it seems like Boogie and his friends are doing a pretty great job giving the game away real quick.